The suitcase was already packed when I came downstairs that Sunday night. It sat in the hallway by the front door, upright and composed, the way Nina always left it. Handle extended, combination lock set, the small red ribbon she'd tied to the zipper pull years ago so she could spot it on a baggage carousel still bright against the black nylon. I'd walked past that suitcase dozens of times. It had become part of the furniture of our marriage, as familiar and unremarkable as the coat rack above it or the shoe rack below. That Sunday night, for the first time, it made me uneasy. I couldn't have told you why. Nothing about it had changed. The ribbon was the same. The lock was the same. I was the same man I'd been every other Sunday night for the past 2 years, standing in the hallway of the house we'd shared for a decade, looking at evidence of a life that appeared, in every visible way, to be exactly what it claimed to be. And yet, my name is Joel Farron. I am 41 years old. I teach high school history at a school 12 minutes from our house, which means I know more than most people about how lies accumulate in the historical record, how what gets omitted from an account is often more telling than what gets included. I have always considered this a professional insight. I didn't realize, until that Sunday night, that I had never thought to apply it at home. Nina and I had been married for 10 years. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party when we were both 30, both recently arrived in the city for different reasons, both slightly out of our depth in the way young professionals in new cities always are. She was a logistics consultant. She handled supply chain operations for a mid-sized pharmaceutical firm, which meant, in practical terms, that her working life involved a great deal of travel. Site visits, supplier audits, regional meetings. She was away, on average, 3 nights a week, sometimes more. This had been our normal for 7 of our 10 married years. Before that, we'd both been in the city full-time, and the adjustment to her travel schedule had been one of the quiet renegotiations that marriages require. We had made it work. I handled the household when she was gone. She made an effort, when she was home, to be truly home, present, engaged, bringing her considerable energy back through the front door like something the house needed. We didn't have children. This was a choice we had made together, clearly and without grief, early in the marriage, and I had never regretted it and did not think she had either. Our life was the two of us, with all the relative freedom that entailed, a nice house, good holidays, evenings that belonged entirely to ourselves. I had considered us fortunate. The suitcase in the hallway watched me. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water I didn't drink and stood at the sink looking at the back garden in the dark. The motion sensor light out there had been broken for 3 weeks, and I kept forgetting to fix it. In the glass of the window, I could see a pale reflection of myself, a lean, dark-haired man in an old university sweatshirt, holding a glass, looking at nothing. Nina came downstairs at 9:30, showered and wearing the comfortable clothes she always traveled in, soft trousers, a loose-knit top, trainers. She moved through the kitchen with the easy efficiency of a person running a familiar sequence, checked her phone, opened her laptop briefly, closed it, poured a glass of water, drank it standing at the counter. She had a flight at 6:20 Monday morning, which meant a car at 4:45, which meant an early night. "Flight's on time," she said. "Good," I said. We talked for 20 minutes about ordinary things, a book I was reading, a parent-teacher issue I had coming up, what she wanted for dinner when she got back Thursday. We were warm with each other, comfortable. She kissed me before going up to bed, a real kiss, not a perfunctory one, and told me not to stay up too late. I stayed up too late. I sat at the kitchen table after she'd gone upstairs, and I let the unease I'd been feeling since the hallway slowly take shape, the way a developer lets a photograph emerge in the bath, not forcing it, just allowing it to become visible. What was bothering me? Nothing I could name. A texture, a quality of performance in the familiar routine, like watching a play you know well and noticing, for the first time, that the actors are acting. Everything correct. Everything in its place. The suitcase, the red ribbon, the Monday morning flight, the kiss goodnight. All of it exactly right. All of it, perhaps, exactly too right. I went to bed. I slept poorly. At 4:30, I heard her moving quietly in the dark, the soft sounds of a person leaving, the zip of a toiletry bag, the low rumble of the suitcase wheels on the wooden floor, the taxi door closing in the street below. I lay in the bed she'd just left and listened to the silence the house made around her absence. It was the same silence it always made. Except that morning, it felt like a question. What Joel experiences in this opening is the first fracture between the marriage he believes he inhabits and the marriage that may actually exist. His profession is deeply relevant. A history teacher is trained to read absences, to ask what the record leaves out, to distrust the overly clean account. That he has never applied this analytical habit to his own home is not a failure of intelligence, but a function of trust, and of the particular blindness that intimacy creates. We do not scrutinize what we love because scrutiny implies doubt, and doubt implies a willingness to lose. Nina's departure is meticulous in its normalcy: the right clothes, the right timing, the real kiss. But it is precisely this perfection that unsettles Joel on a preconscious level. The brain registers rehearsal before the mind identifies it. His insomnia is the body's first honest report. The question the silence poses is one he is not yet willing to articulate, but it has been asked, and it will not unask itself. I have always been, by temperament, a patient man. My students describe me as calm. My colleagues call me measured. Nina, in the early years, called it my superpower, the ability to sit with uncertainty without being consumed by it. I am not sure she meant it as a criticism then. Looking back, I wonder. The week after that uneasy Sunday, I went back to my ordinary life with deliberate attention. I taught my classes. I marked papers. I went to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday. I had dinner alone on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with a book propped against the fruit bowl, the way I always did when Nina was traveling. I spoke to her each evening by phone. Brief, easy calls, the operational check-ins of a couple that has conducted this arrangement for years. She sounded fine. She always sounded fine. The city she was visiting this week was Frankfurt. A supplier audit, she'd said. 2 days of meetings, then a site review on Wednesday. She'd been to Frankfurt several times. She knew the hotel. She brought back, reliably, a specific brand of marzipan from the airport that I had developed a genuine fondness for. I did not think about Frankfurt particularly. I thought about the Sunday night feeling. Let it sit at the back of my mind like an ungraded essay, something to come back to. What returned my attention more sharply was something that happened on Tuesday evening. I was at the gym, on the treadmill, when I saw a notification on my phone. It was from our shared family calendar, an app Nina and I had used for years to coordinate schedules, flag travel dates, mark important events. The notification was a reminder: Nina, Frankfurt, Monta Thursday. Routine. Normal. I would have swiped it away without a second thought, except that directly below it, half visible before the screen dimmed, was another entry I didn't immediately recognize. A personal entry, not a work one, in the separate color she used for non-work events. The screen locked before I could read it. I finished my run. I showered. I drove home. I opened the shared calendar on my laptop, more out of curiosity than anything else. The entry was there, a dinner reservation, Wednesday evening, at a restaurant called Harlow's. I knew Harlow's. It was a nice place, mid-city, the kind of restaurant you went to for a birthday or an anniversary. Nina had been to Harlow's before, with colleagues. She'd mentioned it once. The reservation was for 2 people. On a Wednesday when she was supposed to be in Frankfurt. I stared at this for a moment. Then I looked more carefully at the entry. It had been created from her personal Gmail, not her work account. The reservation was under her name. The Wednesday in question was tomorrow. I closed the laptop. I sat with this for a long time. There was, I told myself, an obvious explanation. The Frankfurt trip had been extended or shortened, and she'd rescheduled the dinner, or was having dinner with a Frankfurt colleague who was also in the city, or had added the reservation by mistake to the shared calendar when she meant to put it in her personal one. There were 10 reasonable explanations. I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. She was at the hotel, she said. She sounded a little tired, the good tired of a productive day. The meetings had gone well. The site review tomorrow was going to be a slog. She asked about my day. I told her it had been fine. I told her I missed her. I didn't mention Harlow's. When we hung up, I sat for a while longer in the kitchen, and I thought about how easy it would have been to ask. One question, a single, casual mention of the calendar entry, and how deliberately, with what felt like a cold and analytical precision, I had chosen not to ask it. I knew, somewhere below the level at which I was ready to know, what that choice meant. Over the following week, I began paying attention in a new way. Not paranoid. I want to be careful about that word, because paranoia implies a distortion of reality, and I had not yet determined whether my reality was distorted or not. Attentive, the way I paid attention in the archive, looking for the shape of what wasn't there. I noticed that Nina's travel schedule, which I had always accepted without much scrutiny, followed a remarkably consistent pattern. Monday departure, Thursday return, almost every week. I had always understood this as the rhythm of her work. Looking at it now, I noticed it was also the rhythm of a very organized concealment, one that would give a person 3 full days every week in which to be somewhere other than where they claimed to be. I noticed that she never left luggage tags on her suitcase. This was not in itself unusual. Many travelers remove them. But it meant that I had no way, from the physical evidence available to me in our hallway, to verify a single destination she had ever named. I noticed that when she called from hotel rooms, there was never any ambient hotel room sound, the muffled corridor noise, the climate control hum, the particular acoustic of a tiled bathroom. Her calls had always had the quality of a quiet, closed room. A room she was entirely comfortable in. A room that sounded, if I was honest with myself, like home. I wrote none of this down. I told no one. I carried it the way you carry a weight you are still deciding whether to put down. On Thursday, she came home. She brought the marzipan. She kissed me at the door, moved through the kitchen with her familiar energy, began unpacking almost immediately. Something she'd always done. She said she couldn't relax with an open suitcase. She talked about Frankfurt. The supplier had been difficult but fair. The hotel had changed its breakfast menu, and not for the better. There was a new airport lounge in Terminal 2 that was genuinely excellent. It was detailed, confident, utterly convincing. And because I had been a history teacher for 15 years, I knew exactly what detailed, confident, convincing accounts sometimes concealed. The central mistake in this section is one of omission. Joel has the opportunity to ask about the Harlow's reservation and consciously withholds the question. This is a psychologically coherent choice. Asking the question makes the problem real, while not asking preserves the possibility that there is no problem, but it is a mistake nonetheless. It initiates a dynamic in which he becomes a passive investigator of his own life, gathering evidence rather than confronting the source. For Nina, the mistake is leaving a traceable entry in a shared calendar, a slip that suggests either carelessness born of long habit or, more disturbingly, some unconscious wish to be seen. Behavioral psychology notes that people conducting prolonged deceptions frequently develop a kind of fatigue, a loosening of the vigilance that concealment requires. The marzipan is the sharpest detail here, a prop so perfectly chosen, so reliably delivered, that it has become part of the story's wallpaper. Props that authenticate a lie are often the last thing examined, precisely because they have worked for so long. I am going to tell you what I did next, and I want to be honest about the discomfort of it. I looked up her flights. It took 20 minutes and a credit card statement. Nina handled her own work travel bookings through the company's travel portal, but for the trips we discussed, the hotels, the airline lounges, the baggage claims, she flew a small number of carriers consistently. I knew which ones. I had picked her up from the airport enough times to know which terminal she used for which route. The airline's website had a flight status lookup. You could enter a passenger's surname and a travel date and verify a booking. I entered her surname. I entered the most recent Monday departure, the Frankfurt trip. No booking found. I tried the date before. No booking. The date before that. No booking. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and I understood, with the specific, dreadful clarity of a man who has just confirmed what he already knew, that Nina had not flown to Frankfurt. She had not, as far as I could determine, flown anywhere on Monday morning. She had left our house at 4:45 with her suitcase and her red ribbon and her comfortable traveling clothes, and she had gone somewhere that was not an airport. I closed the laptop. I made tea I didn't drink. I stood at the back window and looked at the garden and the broken motion sensor light and the darkness behind it, and I thought about 10 years. Here is where the story became complicated in a way I hadn't anticipated. Because the first thing I felt was not rage, not grief. The first thing I felt was a strange, clinical detachment, the same feeling I get when I find a gap in a historical record and understand that what I'm looking at is not an absence of evidence, but evidence of an absence. Someone removed something. Someone managed this. And then, underneath the detachment, something colder, admiration. Not for the betrayal, never for that, but for the architecture of it. The Monday departures, The consistent Thursday returns, the marzipan, the airline lounges, the detailed hotel reports. This had not been careless. This had been constructed. I needed to know how long. Over the next 2 weeks, I went through our financial records with the same methodical patience I brought to archival work. Nina had her own account. We had always maintained some financial independence alongside our joint account, and I had never questioned this. Now I read 3 years of her personal statements, which she kept in a shared folder on our home server that I had never previously opened. The statements were largely unremarkable, the usual expenses of a professional life. But there were several recurring charges to a property management company, quarterly payments, modest amounts that I didn't recognize. We own no investment property. I searched the company name. It was a short-let management agency, the kind that handled furnished apartments for extended or repeated stays. My hands were steady on the keyboard. I noted this with some surprise. I cross-referenced the property management charges against Nina's travel dates. They aligned, imperfectly but significantly, with the Monday through Thursday pattern. She wasn't staying in hotels. She was staying in a flat. There was a flat, somewhere in the city. A flat she paid for quarterly, under a management arrangement that would require minimal personal documentation. A flat that no one in her official life, not her company, not her colleagues, not her husband, had any reason to know about. I thought about who might know. I thought, specifically, about Nina's closest friend, a woman named Claire Morrow, who worked in property law. Claire and Nina had been friends since university. They had dinner every few weeks. I liked Claire. She was dry, precise, occasionally withering in the way of people who spend their days reading contracts. She had been at our wedding. She had called me Joel for 10 years and meant it warmly. I thought about what Claire might know that she had chosen not to say. I thought about the last time the three of us had been together, a dinner at our house 6 weeks ago. Claire had been quieter than usual. I had attributed this to tiredness. Now I ran that evening back through my memory and noticed, in the replay, something I had missed at the time. A moment when Nina said something about an upcoming trip and Claire's expression had done something brief and unreadable before resuming its normal register. A half second. The kind of micro-expression that you clock below conscious awareness and then forget. I didn't call Claire. I wasn't ready to involve another person. I wasn't ready to make the situation legible to anyone outside my own head, because once you say a thing aloud, you can't unsay it, and the world reorganizes itself around the new truth, and there is no going back to the kitchen table and the tea and the careful, private management of ambiguity. Instead, on a Thursday afternoon while Nina was still away, or not away, I drove to the neighborhood where the property management agency was registered. It was a residential area 20 minutes from our house. Quiet streets, a mix of Victorian conversions and newer purpose-built blocks. The kind of area where furnished shortlets were common, young professionals, corporate housing, visiting academics. Unremarkable, untraceable. I drove slowly through 3 streets before I found it. Nina's car, parked outside a low brick building on Cresswell Road, a converted Victorian house, for flats, buzzers at the door. Her car, with the faded parking permit sticker on the left rear window that she'd never gotten around to removing. I drove past without stopping. I drove home. I made dinner. I set the table for one. When she called that evening from the hotel, I told her the site review sounded grueling. I told her I was glad the meetings had gone well. I told her I'd had a quiet day. I asked her to bring the marzipan. She laughed. She said of course she would. I hung up and sat at the table and looked at the single plate and the single glass and the book propped against the fruit bowl, and I thought, how many of these evenings? How many dinners alone that I believed were the temporary cost of a shared life? While across the city she sat in a flat I didn't know existed, living a parallel version of something I thought was mine. The number, I suspected, was large. Claire Morrow is this section's most psychologically loaded presence, and she is barely present at all. The half-second expression at dinner, caught, filed, forgotten, and now retrieved, illustrates how betrayal radiates outward through social networks, contaminating every friendship that has chosen silence over honesty. Claire knows. Her legal instincts and personal loyalty are in direct conflict, and she has resolved that conflict in favor of Nina, which is, arguably, the more human choice, but not the more ethical one. Joel's decision not to contact her is equally revealing. He is still protecting the version of his life in which this investigation is private, containable, a matter between him and Nina alone. The discovery of the flat on Cresswell Road transforms suspicion into near certainty with a single image: her car, the faded parking permit. And Joel's response to this is the story's quietest act of psychological courage. He drives home, makes dinner, and asks for the marzipan. This is not weakness. This is a man giving himself the time he needs to hold the truth before he acts on it. The question I kept returning to was not who. The who felt, in some ways, beside the point, or at least answerable in due course, when I was ready for it. The question that consumed me was how. How do you live alongside a person for 10 years and not see it? How does a life that feels solid reveal itself to be, in fundamental ways, a construction? What is the precise mechanism by which a person you know in the dark, whose breathing you can identify, whose fears and habits and appetites you believe you understand, what is the mechanism by which that person becomes a stranger? I spent the next week reading what I'd taught without always applying: the history of human deception. Not academically, personally. And what I found, over and over, was the same answer. We don't see it because we are not looking. We are not looking because looking would cost us something we are not yet willing to pay. Certainty, above all, is expensive. Doubt is bearable precisely because it is still doubt. I also, in a more practical vein, started paying attention to what Nina carried. Specifically, what came in and out of the suitcase. Over the following 2 Mondays, I watched more carefully than I ever had. Not obviously, I was not a man made for obvious surveillance. But I noticed that the items she packed were broadly consistent with travel, but oddly inconsistent with the specific destinations she named. For Frankfurt in October, she packed summer-weight fabrics. For Edinburgh in November, she brought no coat. These were small things, easily rationalized. But they were the kind of packing errors that a person makes when they are packing for a known environment, a familiar flat, rather than for the weather of a claimed destination. I also noticed, over those weeks, that she never checked in for flights on her phone. I had always assumed she did this privately, before I was awake. Now I understood, there were no flights to check in for. In the 3rd week of November, I did something I have thought about a great deal since. I called the property management agency. I did not impersonate anyone. I did not claim to be her. I said I was calling on behalf of a tenant to clarify a quarterly billing schedule, and the woman on the phone, bored, efficient, confirmed, without much thought, that the flat at Cresswell Road was on a standard quarterly arrangement, occupied by the same leaseholder for approximately 18 months. 18 months. I thanked her and hung up. 18 months. 54 Mondays through Thursdays, give or take. Somewhere between 200 and 250 nights, in a flat 20 minutes from our house, in a life I had not been invited into. This is when the secondary twist arrived, the one I hadn't expected, the one that shifted everything. I received, that same afternoon, a message from my colleague and close friend, Patrick Hale. Patrick taught economics at the school, lived 3 streets from us, and had been part of our social life for years. He and his wife, Donna, had been at our house for dinner the previous month. His message was brief. Hey, been meaning to ask. Everything okay with you? No reason. You just seem, I don't know, off. Coffee this week. I stared at this message for a long time. Patrick was not a man of emotional instincts. He was precise, numbers-oriented, not much given to unsolicited welfare checks. For him to send this message meant he had noticed something real. We had coffee on Wednesday. I said I was fine, just tired. But at the end of the conversation, Patrick said something that turned everything sideways. Did Nina mention she'd bumped into Donna? I said she hadn't. Patrick frowned mildly. Odd. Donna ran into her a few weeks back. Not in town. Over near Cresswell Road, I think she said. Nina was coming out of one of those conversion buildings. Donna waved, but she didn't seem to see her. He shrugged. Probably just preoccupied. Donna thought she looked. Well, she said she looked comfortable. Like she was coming home. He moved on. He started talking about a year 12 cohort issue. I listened and responded and drank my coffee, and inside I felt the last piece of the map lock into place. Like she was coming home. That evening, I called Claire. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand. I simply said, Claire, I think I know. And I think you know too. I'm not calling to put you in the middle. I'm calling because I need to not be alone with this for one more day. There was a long silence. Then Claire said, Oh, Joel. And that was enough. She told me what she knew, which was not everything, but was enough. She had known about the flat for roughly a year. She had not known about the person, by name, until 6 months ago. She had told Nina 3 times that she needed to tell me. She had not threatened to tell me herself. She said she had not felt it was hers to tell, and she was sorry. She was genuinely, achingly sorry. I told her I believed her. I did. His name? I asked. She paused. Daniel Reeve. He grew up with Nina. They reconnected. She said it was by chance, 2 years ago, at a conference. I think it was more than chance. 2 years ago. Before the flat. Before the system was in place. The flat had been built around something that already existed. I thanked Claire. I told her not to call Nina. She said she wouldn't, and I believed that too. I sat in the kitchen with all of this. Nina would be home Thursday. She would bring the marzipan. She would unpack immediately, as she always did. She would be warm and comfortable and entirely present, the way she always was when she came back. I had 2 days. The most psychologically significant fork in this section is the moment Joel calls Claire rather than confronting Nina directly. This choice, going sideways rather than forward, reflects a need that goes beyond information gathering. He needs a witness. Sustained solitary knowledge of betrayal is itself a kind of psychological wound. The isolation of being the only person who knows compounds the damage. By telling Claire what he suspects, he is partly freeing himself from the unbearable aloneness of the preceding weeks. What might have happened if he had confronted Nina without first speaking to Claire? He would have had facts, but no emotional context, no understanding of the relationship's history, no knowledge of Daniel Reeve, no sense of scale. The confrontation would have been blunter, more volatile, less equitable. Claire's disclosure transforms a confrontation into a conversation. It also shifts her own moral position. She moves, belatedly, from complicit silence to honest witness. The alternative scenario in which she had spoken a year ago, when she first knew, is one the story cannot explore, but its shadow falls across every subsequent event. Nina came home Thursday evening at 6:12, the same time she always came home, moving through the front door with the suitcase rolling behind her and something in a paper bag. The marzipan, I assumed, and I was right. She set the bag on the counter. She saw me sitting at the kitchen table, and something moved across her face. A fractional hesitation, quickly resolved into her normal expression. But it had been there. She had felt the quality of the room, the way animals feel atmospheric pressure before a storm, and her face had given it a single involuntary frame. She knew. Not what I knew, perhaps, but she knew something had shifted. Good trip, I said. Long, she said. The site review ran over. She set the bag down. I brought you. Sit down, I said. She looked at me. Something careful entered her posture. Not fear, exactly, but readiness. The readiness of a person who has prepared for a possibility and is now watching it arrive. She sat. I had thought about how to do this. I had rehearsed it, in the way you rehearse difficult things, going through versions in my head. The confrontational version, the cold version, the devastated version. What I ended up with was simpler than any of them. I told her what I knew, not as an accusation, as a statement of fact. The flight records, the Harlow's reservation, the property management company, Cresswell Road, 18 months, Daniel Reeve. I told it as a chronology because that is how I think, because I am a historian and the sequence of things matters to me, and I needed her to understand that I had not reached this moment by chance or intuition, but by following a trail of evidence she had believed was adequately hidden. She didn't interrupt. She sat with her hands flat on the table, the way a student sits when they know they've failed and are waiting for the grade. When I finished, there was a silence. How long have you known? She said. I've been building toward it for about 6 weeks, I said. I've known for certain for the past week. She nodded. She was looking at the table. Is it over? I asked. With him. A pause. No. Are you in love with him? She looked up. Her eyes were dry, as Mara's had been, and the parallel chilled me, because it told me this was not the revelation it was for me. She had been living in this for 2 years. She had had 2 years to adjust to its shape. Yes, she said. I'm sorry. I know that's the worst possible answer. But you asked me to be honest, and that's honest. I had asked for honesty. I sat with it. The flat, I said. You've been going there every week. Yes. For 18 months. Yes. And the trips, the meetings, Frankfurt, Edinburgh, all of it. I work from the flat when I'm there. It isn't entirely, she stopped. She looked at me. I was going to say it isn't entirely false, but it is. It's a false life, and I've been running it alongside this one, and I am sorry, Joel. I'm sorry in a way I don't know how to say. Did you think I'd never find out? She took a long breath. I think I stopped asking myself that question. I think I got to a point where I was just living it, and the rest was in some room I'd locked. We talked for a long time. The kitchen grew dark around us, and neither of us moved to turn on the light. And eventually we were sitting in the dim light of the city coming through the window, two people at a table with a paper bag of marzipan between them, trying to find words for something that had been shapeless for too long. She told me about Daniel. They had grown up in the same town. He had been at the conference 2 years ago, and they had talked for an evening, and she had felt, for the first time in a long time, something she described haltingly as recognized. I asked her what she meant. She said, seen. Fully seen. In some way she had not felt in a long time. Perhaps had never fully felt here. I didn't ask if that was about me. I was afraid of the answer, and I was also, by then, beyond the point where the answer would change anything. What do you want to happen now? I asked. She was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I can go back, she said. I've been somewhere else for 2 years. I'm not sure I can find my way back to this. And I think you deserve more than someone trying to find their way back. There is a particular devastation in being let go with care. It is, in some ways, worse than cruelty, because cruelty gives you something to push against, and this simply opens into a space you don't know how to fill. I told her I needed her to stay somewhere else that night. She went to her sister's. She left the suitcase. I sat alone in the kitchen until the early hours of the morning. In the dark, with the broken censer light in the garden and the paper bag on the counter and the 10 years of ordinary Thursdays stacked somewhere just behind my eyes, irreversible and unchangeable in mine. Nina's admission that she stopped asking herself the question of discovery is one of the most psychologically precise moments in the story. This is dissociation as a coping mechanism. The ability to partition a life into sealed compartments and inhabit each one fully without allowing them to contaminate each other. It is, paradoxically, a form of functional intelligence misapplied. The same organizational capacity that made her an effective logistics consultant enabled her to run a parallel life with operational precision. Her language around Daniel, recognized, seen, reveals the emotional texture of what the affair provided, not simple attraction, but a sense of identity retrieval. This complicates our moral reading without excusing her choices. Joel's restraint throughout the confrontation is both his greatest strength and a form of self-protection. By maintaining control of the narrative's pace, he prevents himself from being overwhelmed. His final request, that she leave, is the story's moral hinge. It is an act of self-respect that comes from clarity, not anger. And her compliance, without argument, suggests she too understands that this is no longer a negotiation. I have fragments of my marriage. I have 10 years of real moments. The early years when the city was new and we stayed up too late and laughed at things that were not particularly funny. The middle years of comfort and habit and the particular warmth of knowing someone in all weathers. The later years, which I now understand differently, that felt like steadiness but were also perhaps a kind of drift. I have all of this, and I will not throw it out because the ending was wrong. History does not work by retroactive erasure. What happened, happened. It was, on many days, good. I also have the present. This Tuesday evening. These rooftops. This line of trees in the park. I fixed the motion sensor light in the last week before we sold the house. It seemed important to fix it. It works now, a clean sweep of light every time something moves through the garden. I don't know why that felt like the right thing to do. I just know that it did. And maybe that is where I am. Fixing what I can, letting go of what I can't, sitting at the edge of something open and unknown and being, most days, approximately okay. There is no clean conclusion to a story like this. There are only the questions that remain when the noise settles, the ones you stop running from and start carrying instead. What does it mean to know a person? What does presence really require? And how many ordinary Thursdays can pass before you realize that the life you're describing to yourself is not quite the one you're living? I don't have answers. I'm not sure answers are the right thing to want. I think the right thing is to stay awake, to notice the bowl beside the keys, to ask the question at the kitchen table before it becomes the question you ask in the dark, alone, 8 months later. Stay awake. That's the whole lesson. Everything else follows from that. The resolution of this story refuses the comfort of transformation through triumph. Joel does not emerge healed, remade, or certain. He emerges awake, which is, the story argues, the only realistic version of recovery available to someone who has lived through sustained architectural deception. His historical sensibility gives him both a framework for grief and a method of resistance. He will not rewrite the past because it ended badly, because honest historiography demands that we hold the full record. His observation about the motion sensor light, fixed in the last week before the house sold, is the story's emotional center. It is not symbolic in a heavy-handed way. It is simply the action of a man who could not leave something broken. That instinct, to repair the small, reparable things even when the larger thing is lost, is perhaps the story's deepest moral gesture. The questions that close the narrative are not rhetorical. They are genuine and unanswered. What does it mean to know a person? What does presence require? These are not questions the story resolves. They are questions it bequeaths. And that is the appropriate ending for a story about a man who has spent his professional life teaching others that the most important work is not finding answers. It is learning to ask the right questions. Across all 6 parts, this story maps the slow geography of a deception so carefully constructed that its unraveling required not drama but patience, the same patience that enabled it. Joel and Nina are, in their different ways, people of unusual competence. She at building and sustaining a parallel life, he at reading structural absence. The tragedy of their marriage is that these qualities were never turned toward each other. He did not scrutinize what he trusted. She did not feel sufficiently seen to stay within what she had. The story does not assign simple blame. Nina's choices were real and harmful and hers. But the emotional texture of her explanation, recognized, seen, points to a need that went unmet for long enough to become a crisis. This is not an excuse. It is a context. The distinction matters. What the story ultimately offers is not a cautionary tale about infidelity, but a meditation on attentiveness, on the difference between being present and being merely there. Joel's final insight, stay awake, is deceptively simple and entirely earned. It does not mean be suspicious. It means be genuinely, regularly curious about the person you are living alongside. Ask the small questions before they become the large ones. Notice the bowl beside the keys. The most dangerous thing in any close relationship is not malice. It is the comfortable assumption that you already know.